No, we are live. Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Niru Padmanabhan, and we are actually, I've been asked to say it appropriately in the Indian way. Padmanabhan. So my name is Niru Padmanabhan, and I am so happy to welcome you guys to Public Allies platform again. Public Allies Inc. We're a nonprofit based out of Ontario, and we're tasked with serving the most vulnerable individuals in society. However, during COVID, some stuff happened and the pandemic prevented us from running our regular programming. So, what we did is we pivoted. We pivoted online and we started to find a new audience. The individual that was no longer able to go back to a job that they once had, their field is no longer there, and they had to innovate and take their skills on the market. So they became the solopreneur, the futurepreneur, the entrepreneur, a gig worker, a side gig worker, and they started to develop the skills and the confidence necessary to go out there and achieve what they want and create a brand new environment for work, a brand new industry. But in that process, a lot of people realized that they couldn't level up, that they were afraid of certain things. And one of the things that have made people the most scared was going out there and figuring out the world on their own. Being an entrepreneur is sometimes different than being employees. So what started doing is we started doing unique and different ways of getting and reaching people on educational levels to decrease their anxiety around getting out there. And we started educating people on different types of topics. And as we've seen, our reach has grown to nearly 150,000 worldwide, and our average videos fetch 17, 23,000 plus views. So we thank everybody for supporting us, and we continue to bring you content that you ask for. And please continue to contact us and let us know what we can bring. And if I'm to introduce myself, I always forget to introduce myself. So that's one of the things that I'm going to do today. I am a financial professional as well as a mental health professional as well. So I have about 14 years of experience plus in mental health, social services. And then about 2 years ago, I pivoted into financial awareness, financial literacy, and financial health. So I did this because a lot of people on my caseload were just regular people that did not know how to prepare. And I love educating people on finances. If you want to know a little bit more, contact us on Public Allies. I'd love to give you an education session on it. And today we have with us Mr. Nirma Jesuthasan. Nirma has been on our platform many times, and we keep on bringing him back because of popular demand. So just let me introduce him a little bit more formally. Nirma is the principal engineer at Engineva Research Solutions. He has been an instrumental force in recovering more than $30 million in SR&D refunds for clients over the years. He is a mechanical engineer with 20 years of experience in planning, execution, funding of a wide variety of research, development in R&D projects. His engineering background involves design of experiments and computational modeling, physical phenomenon, specifically design, fabrication, modeling of loop heat pipes, and thermal management of ground and space applications. He is the recipient of numerous accolades, including a Canadian Space Agency Research Award. And as we talk about Nirma, one thing he never talks about is all the community work does and all the ways he supports his community. He's an avid member of his community. He sits on many boards and many advisory boards to help assist individuals, companies to level up, to move forward. And he's a great supporter of helping underprivileged individuals. So I hand it off to you, Nirma, and thank you again for supporting Public Allies so much and helping companies grow in what they do. So if you want to take it away from here.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, you. And it's always a pleasure to be on your platform. Hello, everyone. My name is Nirma Jesuthasan. I'm the principal engineer at Engineva Research Solutions. Today, my talk will be on the SR&D tax credit program. I'll provide an overview as well as outline the benefits of this program via 2 case studies. The SR&D program, pronounced SR&D, stands for Scientific Research and Experimental Development. It's a tax credit program. It is in fact the largest federal government support to encourage research and product development in Canada. The program provides tax credits to over 20,000 claimants annually to offset R&D expenditures such as salaries, material costs, and contractor costs. And of the 20,000 claimants, 75% are actually small businesses. This program is administered by the Canada Revenue Agency and is governed by regulations in the Income Tax Act. The biggest misconception around this program is that SR&D or SR&D is only available for large R&D companies like Merck Frost, Bombardier, Pratt & Whitney. And this is simply not the case. In fact, it's the reverse. SR&D tax credits or refunds are available to Canadian companies of all sizes.
Nirma,
Yes?
you're not sharing your PPT. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and share that right now.
Oh, maybe I should restart again, huh?
No, you can start from where you left off.
So can you see my screen now?
Yep, you can see your screen.
Nice, wonderful. So as I was saying, the SR&D program, SR&D stands for Scientific Research and Experimental Development. It is the largest federal government support to encourage research and product development in Canada. The program provides tax credits to over 20,000 claimants to offset R&D expenditures such as salaries, material costs, and Canadian contractor costs. Of the 20,000 claimants, 75% are small businesses. And this program is administered by the Canada Revenue Agency and governed by regulations in the Income Tax Act. So it's not really a grant, it's a tax credits. So all Canadian companies having an eligible project are entitled to apply by law. The caveat is many companies do not know about this. So the largest misconception, primarily one of the reasons why companies and company owners don't know about it is they assume that SR&D is only for the large R&D companies. And in fact, it's not the case. SR&D tax refunds are available to companies of all sizes, whether you are a startup or publicly traded company, you are entitled to obtain refunds. However, SR&D refunds are highest for small companies and companies belonging to the so-called Canadian Controlled Private Corporation category. These companies are entitled to receive a cash refund. Cash refund actually exceeding 60%, over 60% of eligible salaries, over 40% of material costs, and over 30% of contractor costs. So let's think about this for a second. 60% of eligible salaries is for every dollar that you spend in labor costs allocated to this project, to your R&D project, you're actually receiving 60 cents on that dollar from the Canadian government, right? And 40 cents on the dollar in material costs and 30 cents on the dollar on Canadian contractors. Now, the second misconception around this is the whole notion of we do not do R&D here. Many companies that are developing innovative products, but they don't consider themselves being in the R&D space because of personal interpretation of R&D. The way we grow up, the schools, the experience, the jobs, We have such a high level of expectation of what R&D is. We have this notion, romanticized notion of this mad scientist in some sort of cave, some sort of dark place, performing weird experiments, right? That's R&D for us as kids. But all of that does not really matter. All we need to really understand is what the Canada Revenue Agency, or what the rules in the Income Tax Act considers what SR&D is, right? And according to the Income Tax Act, scientific research and experimental development means a systematic investigation. So there's a method to your work, a systematic work, or that is carried out in a field of science or technology. So there's a definition of field of science and technology, which I will touch upon soon, by means of experiment or analysis. And the definition actually goes into three different types of R&D. One is considered basic research. Basic research is when you do research for the sake of doing research. You want to uncover a new molecule or a new cell. So you're just doing research in pure science. Then there's applied research, where once you detect or you uncover the new molecule or the new chemistry, you want to actually go and develop something more applied. You want to develop a vaccine. Once you understand how viruses work, or certain kind of viruses work, let's say the COVID virus, you now want to move towards an area of research where you're going to apply that knowledge in making vaccines, because there's an application to vaccines, right? But these two categories of research, basic research and applied research, I would say about 2% of the companies in Canada actually fall in that space. You might have the Merck Frost and the IBMs, devoted departments, R&D departments, working on theoretical kind of work. But overall, 98% or so of the companies that perform industrial research belong to the last category, called experimental development. So this is where companies actually advancing technology, science and technology, in order to build their product, in order to improve their product, process, material. So it's not the end goal of building the product, to commercializing of the product, or the material is not where the research is going to happen. It's in order to build and develop that product, you need to uncover something. You need to improve the technology, the underlying technology, for you to then be able to build your product. So that's experimental development, and about 98% of the companies in industrial research fall into this category. Now, in addition to that, the core activity, there's also work that is considered directly in support of the experimental development, applied research, or basic research. Now, according to the law, support work would only belong to the following 8 categories. So engineering work, design work, operation research, mathematical analysis, computer programming, data collection, testing, psychological research constitute this category of work called directly or support work. So what that means is, what is a support work? So if you take, let's say you're developing a new efficient engine, right? That's your R&D project. But you still need some engineer to make the technical drawings of that engine. You still need an engineer or a technical person to figure out what are the bolts, what are the nuts, what are the washers that you need to use to assemble this engine, right? Now, if you look at that kind of work in isolation, drafting or drawing, making the technical drawings of the engine, or selecting the bolts, there's a process for that. You can open up a manual of mechanical engineering handbook, and there's recipes, there's formulas for that. So that's not really research. It's part of engineering work. But although in isolation these work are not R&D, the reason you need to perform them is to test your engine, right? You have this bright idea on a efficient engine. You want to design it, you want to develop it, you want to test it. So you require someone to draw it on CAD. You require someone to figure out the bolts and nuts and washers. So because this is going to be an intrinsic requirement for you to actually build the engine. It's part of your R&D project. So all the labor costs associated with that kind of work, all the engineering work, all the design work, as long as you can reattach it back to your R&D project, all of that cost would be part of your R&D project, and 60% of that labor cost could be recuperable, right? So what is not shred work? So according to the law, shred does not include market research, sales promotion, quality control, research in social science, humanities, prospecting, exploring, or drilling for or producing minerals, petroleum, or natural gas. Commercial production, anything related to commercial production is excluded. Style changes, routine data collection is out. Okay. But the work area eligible for shred is plentiful. Now, in the next few slides, I just want to illustrate how vast that field of science and technology that's eligible for shred is. It's going to be a little bit dense, but I just want to highlight certain key areas. So bear with me for a sec. So in the natural and formal sciences, you have the pure science kind of work, like the mathematics, the physics, the chemical sciences, the biological science, the computer science, right? You could see that the list is pretty long, but it doesn't end there. This is just the natural and formal sciences. Engineering and technology has like civil engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering. And under that, you have thermodynamics, you have aerospace, you have nuclear. So environmental engineering, industrial, nanotech, food and beverage is part of it. Plastics, rubber, paper, wood, textile, clothing is part of it. Medical engineering is part of it. So vast areas. The medical and health science, you have basic medicine, clinical medicine, you have health science, medical biology, right? In agricultural science, so if you're making wine, if you're making craft beer, there is science behind that, right? Forestry, agriculture, fishery, animal, dairy, veterinary science, they're all eligible fields. So according to the law, the only field, if you look at it in the reverse side of things, the only field of science that's excluded are the so-called soft science, like social sciences, humanities, economics, law, media, humanities. But because software is becoming prevalent in many industries, so the law was established in mid 1980s. So, but if, in comparison to 2021, where software is everywhere, you have machine learning, deep learning, everybody's talking about this, big data culture. You have law firms that are developing software platforms to read better contracts. You have accounting companies developing software to collect information from their clients more efficiently. You have music companies that are developing algorithms to figure out whether a certain song is going to be a hit, or how do you modify that song for it to be a hit based on historical information, right? So although these industries were traditionally excluded from the shred tax credit program, because now your project is in software or in computer science, you can now apply because your project is eligible. Your project is in the acceptable field of science. The company does not have to be in the field of science, but the project does have, the project has to be. So how do you actually determine, or how does the CRA determines whether a project is eligible or not? Is it uses the so-called shred test. It involves 5 questions that have been the standard in tax court. So you have to answer yes to all these 5 questions. And that's part of the work that we do. We would go in and scope the project for various clients and figure out whether they have a qualifying project. So the first question is, was there a scientific or technological uncertainty? Now, what is meant by scientific or technological uncertainty is whether a given result, like a goal or objective, can be achieved, or how to achieve it is not known or determined on the basis of generally available scientific or technological knowledge or experience. Meaning, is it based on the current knowledge within the company, involving its people, the education of its people, the experience of its people, and information in the public domain. Right? You can Google today. You can read some common books, articles. So based on that body of knowledge, are you able to solve this problem? If yes, then it's not R&D. It's just your due diligence. If you can say that, based on my experience and information in the public domain, there are certain things that are missing that is perhaps proprietary to one company, and we don't know how to do that. So there's a gap. We don't know how to solve this problem. Then it becomes one step closer to the R&D. The project becomes one step closer to being an R&D project or an SR&D project, right? The second question is, did the effort involve formulating hypotheses? Now, hypothesis is such a big word, right? What really is meant by hypothesis is um, you're elaborating an idea, you're proposing an idea. So once you've identified that there's a problem, or that a technological uncertainty that requires resolution, what's your next step? Well, you're going to propose an idea how to solve that problem, right? So you have to go through this systematic or methodical way of solving the problem. You can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to try something. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, I'm going to try something else. No, that doesn't work. It is called the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program. It has a relationship with R&D. And in R&D world, you work in a consistent manner, you work in a methodical manner, akin to the scientific methodology, right? So the third question is, was the overall approach consistent with a systematic investigation or search? Basically, are you following a scientific methodology? It doesn't have to be, depending on whether you're a 2 people company or a 200 people company, you're going to solve a problem in different manners, right? But you need to, this program expects you to have to follow a certain logic. You're going to propose an idea, you're going to test that idea, then you're going to make interpretation based on the test results. And then, if your conclusion would be, well, my initial idea worked, I'm able to solve this problem, great, I move on to commercialization. Or you might say, well, my first idea only brought me 80% to my goal. I still have another 20% to do, but now I need to be a bit more creative. I need to create a second idea, or propose a second idea, test that second idea, make conclusions, and so on. So almost like a rinse and wash and repeat, sorry, right? Um, like, you can think of this as a high school physics experiment, right? You propose an idea, you test an idea, you make interpretation based on the results, and you make some conclusion. So that's what's expected from the CRA. But in current world, where especially software, we're working in an agile environment, this waterfall kind of model has some issues, right? The way the industry really works is a little bit different than what the CRA is expecting. So, there are some clashes, and it's part of regular life. It's all about presentation, and it's all about having processes in place to be able to show how you're following this methodology. The fourth question, so you have to answer yes to all of these questions, right? The fourth question is, was the overall approach undertaken for the purpose of achieving a scientific or technological advancement? So the advancement is not, I was able to develop this this product with this bells and whistles. It's more like, what did you learn? What is the knowledge that you gained? So your research work could have been a total failure, in the sense that your ideas, you validated that your ideas were not working, right? It's not great from a business point of view, because you wasted like 6 months working on something that failed. But from an R&D perspective, it's beautiful, because you've now eliminated that idea. You've understood why that idea did not work. So let me take a step back. If you just did something and you said, well, it doesn't work, let me move on, that's not going to satisfy this fourth question of, have you attempted to achieve a scientific or technological advancement, sorry. The advancement is the knowledge that you're generating. So you need to learn why your idea failed. You need to figure out, okay, well, my idea failed because this system could not connect to this system because of XYZ reason, or it did connect to this system, but because of XYZ reason, it wasn't fast enough, or it required so much memory, right? You need to be able to say, well, this is what I learned, which I did not know before, which also I couldn't Google and find out, right? So there is a due diligence process in this whole thing, right? Before you say anything is R&D, you're going to try your best practices, because it's going to be cheaper. If you can solve this problem with best practices by Googling and reading some books, it's going to be much cheaper. You're going to try that. It's common sense. So all of these things needs to be documented in a way to show the CRA if they ask you. You're telling the CRA your journey, right? I had this problem. I tried the best practices out there. They were not capable of solving my problem, or maybe they solved it partially, not fully. Therefore, I had to undertake an R&D project to bridge the gap. So that brings us back to the fifth question, which has to be answered as yes, is was a record of the hypotheses tested and the results kept as the work progressed? So basically, you're doing research, you have to document your work. You can't just say, well, yes, I did research, and if someone asks you, do you have proof? Well, no, I don't have any papers. That doesn't work, right? In science, you need to document your work so that you don't repeat the mistakes, or you can educate someone else. You could publish a paper, or you can explain to your community, this is what I learned, and they will benefit from that, right? So what constitute a record of hypothesis tested and results? So the CRA only wants you to have records. They don't actually dictate to you that you need to keep X, Y, and Z as record, because they usually don't interfere in businesses, right? Like a business that has 2 person versus a business that has 200 people, uh, they will document differently. So it all, CRA will say, well, you run your business the way you run it, but just keep evidence of the work. So evidence could actually be emails. You could have an alias at, let's say, R&D at company x.com, and every time you're having discussions with your team around what is the problem you're trying to solve, what are the test results, you could CC that alias, and at the end of the year, you'll have a beautiful set of records with timestamps, people involved in the conversation. But timesheets is, these days, timesheet is very inexpensive. You can create one on Excel, or there are like a lot of web-based timesheets available. That is actually it will simplify your life if you have a timesheet, because then there's no guesswork on how many hours did someone work on this project versus not. There's no guess. You can say, well, this is my process. Every week, my people enter their time. I validate them. I review and validate, and at the end of the year, I pull a report. It says John was spend 1,000 hours on this year on R&D. There's no guesswork there, and that's what the CRA wants, right? They want you to have a rationale to explain how many hours someone worked on this project. That's fair. When you get into this guessing game, oh, well, he was 50% R&D. Well, the question is, why is 50%? Why not 20%? Why not 10%? Why not 80%? Right? So the less guesswork, the better with the CRA. You have lab notes, design documents. You can have CAD documents, technical drawings. In software, you can have like source code, or you can have system architecture. You can have pictures. Many small teams whiteboard a lot of things. We tell them, take a picture, date it, save it. And at the end of the year, or at the end of each, you could do this every week. You could do this every month. At the end of the year, you at least have like 12 summaries or 24 summaries, and it's easy to construct a story, to not just construct a story, to present the story, right? So recognizing shred projects. Now, the obvious candidates, we always think about R&D, what is surrounding us? Well, the iPhones, the smartphones, the tablets, right? So hardware and software, it's intrinsic these days. We always think, oh, well, there's R&D there. And manufacturing, right, where it's common that we say, well, we're building a product, so there's R&D there, like a factory. They're building an engine, or a chair, or a table, or a window. There are machines involved, there are trials involved, there's design involved. There's definitely going to be R&D there. Okay, how about paint? sorry. How about paint? About 20 years ago, paint used to have lead in them. 25, maybe 25 years ago, lead in them. Then it became lead reduced. Then it became lead free. There was oil-based paint, water-based paint. There was smell involved. Now we're very environmentally concerned. Um, the noxious gases. We are careful about that. So there's science behind that in making it less smelly, better, recyclable, more recyclable, less toxic. So there's chemistry involved that in there. There's science in there. Just the regular construction materials. I mean, I'll touch on construction materials next, but even the floorings, right? The different glues, different colors, the textures. How do you keep all these substrates glued together without being toxic and recyclable? There's science there. Construction materials, like especially in Canada with winter, the freeze thaw cycle. Um, we are all constantly innovating in building materials to withstand snow, ice, water, air, um, roofing system, rock salt. It's one of my favorite topic on construction materials. It used to be fiberglass. Now this is a mineral-based thing that's fire retardant, mold resistant. It still maintains its R value even if when it's wet. So in innovation, we don't think about this, right? Windows. I mean, no, we've heard about the single pane, double pane, triple pane, but look at the moldings, the intricate designs to keep these things together. Different companies are always coming up with better products, and part of creating better products involves R&D. Just assembling things, right? Like you don't have to build like a rocket engine to say, hey, I'm doing R&D. You could be like a window manufacturer, and your game plan is, well, it takes me 2 hours to assemble this. I want to come up with a way to assemble this in an hour 30 minutes. I want to shave off 30 minutes from my process. So you're developing some sort of machine, you're developing some sort of plug and play or press fitting kind of mechanism, right? So it's always like, what is available now and how am I trying to make it better? How am I trying to improve something? It's not always about creating something totally new. It's taking something and improving a tiny little bit amount. Um, Plastics, all these different shapes and forms, they have to sustain a certain volume. They have to sustain a certain pressure, recyclability. More and more plastics are being recycled, and forming plastic out of recycled materials has its own challenges because the properties of these materials are now highly variable. So plastic injection molding companies are innovating and figuring out new ways to improve strength of recycled materials. Look at the different shapes and forms. Plastic manufacturers, there's a lot of great plastic manufacturers in Canada, and they're all taking advantage of the program. Food and beverage is another area that we often neglect as R&D. We're making, whether it's food for your pets or food for the people, the right kind of nutrition, the right kind of taste, the right kind of smell. You want to increase shelf life. Say, you have a ice cream that has a shelf life of 6 months. And then you come along and say, hey, well, I want to make a shelf life of a year, maybe 7 months, maybe 6 months and 4 days. It's still a little bit beyond the current standard, and it's fine. There's no high expectation for R&D projects or shred projects. As long as you can move the needle by just one digit, it's fine, right? Food packaging. It's not just about the food packaging, but how do I prevent bacteria from growing? How do I clean my machines in an environmentally friendly way? I don't want to use bleach all the time. Or how do I prevent cross-contamination of nuts? When I make a product with nuts and then I want to make a product without nuts, how do I make sure that there's no cross-contamination? Because nut allergy is such a big thing these days, right? So you're going to innovate and come up with different process, cleaning products, proprietary, like the big companies like the Nelsons, they surely have their own proprietary information. But as a small guy or a new company, you may not have access to their information. You know, there is a cleaning product they're using. You just don't know the chemistry, right? So as a small company, you still have to figure it out, and figuring out requires R&D. Don't forget how the secret of how to put the caramel in the caramel bar is still unknown. So that's one of my favorites. And you know, the hand towel, right? Like you know that certain brands of hand towel papers are more absorbent than others. I'm not going to name names, but you know them. Now why, right? Like there is science behind that makes certain tissues more absorbent than others. Again, things we don't really think of that as R&D. Textile, like the clothings, we expect a lot these days from our clothes. It needs to be water resistant. It needs to breathe. You know, we don't want to sweat all the time. We don't want an Eskimo kind of jacket. We want something very thin. So you know, people are working like day and night behind the scene to come up with the better products, right? And lots of R&D there. So at this point, you know, I want to illustrate how different companies can take advantage of the SR&D program, and through two different case studies. One is a startup where this startup is in the food industry, food sector. So they actually wanted to develop a product or a methodology, actually, a methodology to reduce sugar in baking goods. The reason they went this route is they understood that 1 in 3 Canadians has diabetes. And apparently research shows that Canadians 20 years of age today face a 50% chance of developing diabetes in their lifetime. Okay, so this company, you know, had a close relative being impacted by diabetes, and this is one of the reasons that they, you know, embarked in this adventure. So the uncertainty is, well, if you're not going to use sugar, see, sugar is also a preservative. It helps maintain shelf life of you know, baking goods. That's why sweets usually can sustain a longer shelf life than other materials before it goes bad, right? I guess, you know, especially the Indian community would know that with all the Indian goodies. So the uncertainty was which combination of natural sweeteners and flour substitute would create this low net carbohydrate and low glycemic impact. Well, that was their goal, right? That was their goal. It's not another company could come and say, well, I want to make that glycemic impact less than 25, less than 10, right? But this is their goal. So what they've done is they worked with different contractors. Being a startup, right? Entrepreneurs, operators, they're working on sweat equity. Okay, they're working a lot, but they're not taking a salary. So unfortunately, being a tax credit program, there's an advantage of taking the salary. But again, I won't advocate that you have to stake salaries, because we don't know the financial health of a company, and you know, that's the accountant's work. All we could say is that if you took salaries, then you know, this is the amount of refund you would be entitled to. But we're always advocating that, you know, it's a holistic approach. You have to look at it from multiple things. Maybe it's best that you don't take salaries. So I'm not going to get into that. But so this person, he was not taking a salary. Used a contractor. Expenses were about $120,000. Materials to make this recipe tested was about $9,000. So $129,000 on making this sugarless baking good, right? So the refund that we were able to obtain for them was about $43,000. Now, here's where it would have helped if we were working with the company right from the start, because this is where the R&D tax planning can come in, and we could have advised them that if you actually did take the 120 as salary, meaning like you don't necessarily have to take the salary. You could have hired an employee. You could have hired a part-time employee instead of a contractor to do the work, because you're going to spend that money anyways. So why don't you just hire someone in-house, maybe even part-time, or maybe 2 people part-time to do this? And if that was the case, your refund would have been closer to $78,000, right? So it's part of that strategy. It's part of knowing what how do you set yourself up with your accountant, with your lawyer, so that your company is set up properly. You have an accountant that knows what's your game plan, not just at the end of the tax year, like you find an accountant and say, hey, I have to file my taxes. Then you miss out on all these planning, right? I find that a lot of entrepreneurs uh, are afraid of asking questions to their legal team, asking questions to the accountants, financial advisors, because they feel that they have to pay all the time. I get that, but sometimes like it's better to pay like $300 or $400 to get that advice up front, and not and get like a $35,000 boost in your refund, than miss out on that because of um, you know because you are being faithful, and then end up with and missing out on opportunity. That's what I'm saying, right? Uh, Maybe you would have had that conversation, and at the end of the day, the advice would have been, you don't take the salary, take the go with the contractor, but at least you've explored your options. The next one is a growing company. So this is a company where they wanted to develop a real-time collaborative travel planning platform. So think of Facebook meeting Expedia. So it was a platform to help families and friends collaboratively plan a trip, whether it was a wedding or whether it was like some sort of resort planning. These kinds of things were very popular prior to the pandemic, right? Like kind of like planning the whole itinerary, not just booking the flights, but the hotels, the activities that you're going to do as part of a group, the places you're going to see, the booking of the cars, the boats, the flights, the hotels, the whole picture. So the uncertainty was, again, because your system would connect to flight information from different carriers, right? Air Canada, KLM, Lufthansa, whoever, right? Like, and that information is changing on a almost minute basis, or half a minute, 30 seconds basis, right? It's constantly changing. Information on hotels constantly changing. So the problem was, how do you get and combine all this information that's always changing in time, to then only present the necessary information to, let's say, Nero and myself, like planning a trip together, right? So that was a challenge. That was the R&D problem that they had to solve. And these guys were they had like 12, 15 developers. So the salaries were like about $410,000. I mean, when I say 12 developers, including the contractors, 700,000, $707,000 in contractors. No material costs, because software companies don't have material costs like raw materials. Total expenditure of $1.1 million. Total refund obtained $490,000. So it goes to show you that almost half, 50% of your spend was recovered. It's not quite 50%. I'm just saying close to. So you have to know about these programs. You have to know the in and outs, and how can you take advantage of this. Does your project qualify? What do you need to do to make your project qualify? On a financial side of things, does your expenses are your expenses eligible for these refunds, right? Like, do I hire like a developer outside of Canada? Do I hire a developer inside Canada? Like, what are the repercussions, right? So be educated. Like, Google things and learn, and contact us if you have any questions. We're happy to like have a conversation. So we have over 15 years of experience in the R&D funding space. We recovered close to now $35 million across Canada. Our services include preparing the complete SR&D tax credit application. There's two components to it: financial and technical. We also look at technology grants. We perform risk analysis on projects to figure out whether it's worthy moving forward with this project from an R&D standpoint or not. There are also different ways of financing your project, and usually they need like a letter of recommendation saying, hey, you know what, this project is strong in its R&D content. they need a letter of support. So we would do that kind of analysis, and we assist claimants during all stages of claim dispute resolution across with the CRA. Uh, and education, I think that's primarily where things start. You have to educate the entrepreneurs and companies on different programs, and let them do their own research too, right? So thank you, and I'm happy to like address any questions you may have through Niru as the avatar.
I actually have quite a few questions for you, Nirma. So whenever you're ready, you can stop
Yes.
sharing your screen.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. So I am going to put this on gallery view. So we have quite a few questions. Some of them are asking very specific questions. So one specific question I'm even wondering about is, what are some companies or projects that you're aware of where they didn't even bother asking for the SR&D grant, but they would have qualified?
Most of the problem is around the notion of talking to your tax advisor only at tax time. So some people are not set up properly. Sometimes you have a qualifying project, but you're not taking salaries. So think about it this way: it's a two-prong approach. There's a technical eligibility point of view, and there's, well, what are you recovering? Are you right? So you can only recover T4 salaries. Okay, you can only recover material cost that goes into building your prototype or your device, your experimental device. You can only recover Canadian contractor costs. So say you are taking remuneration through dividends, and that's a common practice for owner operators of small companies. You're not eligible, right? You may be the technical leader, you may be the senior software developer, you may be the senior engineer. Your work from a technical standpoint qualifies, but financially there's nothing, no eligible cost for you to recover 60% on, right? 60% of zero is still zero, right? So a lot of software companies in the early days, just because of how they don't have enough cash at hand, they don't take salaries, and lot of people miss out on that in the first few years. Maybe that is the natural course of action for some, because there's no other way. There's no money in the bank for them to take the salary, right? The manufacturing companies, on the other hand, they are generally more established, right? You don't necessarily have a manufacturing company start like last year, right? Like they're established, or when people start manufacturing company, they have previous experience, and usually they are exposed to these kinds of grants and tax credits, and then they plan accordingly. And another thing is manufacturing. When you have asset, banks are happy to lend you money, right? When you have machineries, you can leverage that to borrow money. When you have a receivable ready, you could leverage that, and banks are happy to lend you money. When in a software environment, there is really no asset. Your IP is the source code, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not really tangible, and software companies have tough time getting money from banks and other financial services, right? Unless you've established yourself, you have a product already. Just saying, hey, I have this bright idea and I'm almost in demo stage, nobody's going to give you money. It's only friends and family, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where you get into like angel investors and
Right,
stuff
right,
like that.
exactly.
So the second question that I have is, and I know we've covered this last time when you were on our platform. So what if I have an idea, but I don't know how to execute it? I don't know what to do. Can I possibly qualify for the SR&D grant?
So uh, the notion of it being a grant is
Oh,
not
sorry, I
wrong,
meant tax credit. My
right?
apologies.
So no. It's not to point this out to you. It's common that people say that it's a grant, and what happens with that notion of grant is that expectation of you get money up front, right? A grant is something that you apply, you get the money, and then you do the work. So the SR&D program is almost like in reverse. You have to spend the money, and if your project is eligible, you're recuperating a significant portion of that back, right? So when you say you have this idea, you don't know how to execute it, well, then you need to figure out, you need to find people to help you execute it. Like, you don't need to be the software developer, right? You can approach a software firm and say, hey, you know what, I want you to develop this, or maybe we can partner up to develop this, right? So you actually have to do the work. So that's why I'm saying it's not a grant where you say, I have this idea, you like it, give me money, I'm going to go do it. No, this actually involves you actually paying yourself, doing the work, and getting reimbursed through the tax process.
That's great. And if companies have an idea and they started their project, when is the best time for them to approach uh, yourself or your company?
Right. So legally, because it's part of the tax income tax act, it's associated to the tax year. So legally, you have 18 months after your fiscal year end to apply for the work that could be qualified as shred for a given tax period, right? But the problem with that is 18 months is a year and a half. Now, a lot of things can happen in that 18 months, right? Your senior software developer could leave, your CTO could leave, you could lot of things could happen where you're gonna lose information, right? Especially in a startup world where you're not really worried about SR&D. You're worried about delivering the product to your customers. You're worried about building the better product to your clients. You're not really focused on documentation. You're not really focused on keeping making sure your people are documenting the work. So when they leave, sometimes you lose that genius or the work that they've actually done, right? You have a gap because you were not following them very closely. So when do people think about this? During tax time? Or I have to file my taxes, I have to put a claim with my corporate taxes, because this SR&D application, if you wish, is not really an application. It's part of the income. Sorry, it's part of the corporate tax return. So think of this as additional schedules that goes into your tax return, right? So it's people always think about this during tax time. So, but I would say when you're actually starting to do the work, reach out so that we can have like an education on what is eligible, what is not, and we can implement processes like timesheets, like better documentation practice. Like it doesn't have to be onerous. You could have like a monthly team meeting and say, well, what did we actually do from an R&D standpoint, guys and girls, right? And just take notes, or whiteboard it, take a picture, and move on, right? Or just
Hmm.
create a binder, like old school style. Create a binder and just put paper, attach the papers, and date the documents, right? Or you could save it on SharePoint or a cloud infrastructure, right? So that helps you because first you will remember at the end of the year what actually happened, right? Even if people leave or not, you will remember, and even your people, they will remember, oh yeah, remember this was a problem, and then they will really understand and recall what happened. They'll give you more information, because when we come at the
Hmm.
end of the tax year and we ask them, well, what did you do, like what was your problem, we're being more like acting more like a investigative journalist, right? We are probing them and saying, well, you developed this cool product, like why was this R&D for you, like you're smart, you guys are a bunch of developers, what was the problem here, right? Like, so that's why are we asking this, because that's exactly the questions that the CRA wants us to answer, right? They want us to answer things about the fundamental nature of the problems that are roadblocking you, right? And when you have the right documentation, it's just easy, people kind of remember. Otherwise they have to go back in emails, they have to recollect, like it's more risky.
So everybody document, document, document. I think
Yes.
as you can tell from the theme of the conversations that have been, Nirma is telling you to keep proper records of what's been going on. And I think that was the theme of our last
Yes.
conversation. Um, to let everybody know, we at Public Allies, our friends, our families, we've had the opportunity to work with Engieva and with Nirma. We have referred people. So SR&D tax credits are available and they do happen to people and they are in the process of working. And it just makes you a whole lot better because as you have access to people like Nirma, you have access to these tax credits. At the same time, you have access to people that Nirma knows or these companies know that can make things happen because they've worked with them. So it's also about putting together that team. So I've seen Nirma work his magic. He doesn't put that whole picture out there. So I want to put it together. If you have an idea, talk to Nirma about that idea, and he is more than happy to share his tips because he always does. He's an advocate for making it happen. That should be the tagline for you guys, and he will make it happen. So give him a shout, give his company a call, and see where your project's at and if it qualifies, because you never know, it could qualify or it could qualify with a tweak here and there. And getting money back from the government means more money in your pocket to reinvest back into growing, marketing that product. Money that you would have had to dish out from your own pocket is now coming from the government. So it gives you that strength, possibility, and foundation to grow your business. And as a financial professional, I will say this: it's harder to get those grants. It's harder to get those business loans. You have interest on them, paybacks on them. So if you're getting that money from the government, why not? Why not? Because we have so many individuals that you talk to and you say, hey, this is available. Have you even tried it? And they say, no, I don't want to mess around with the government. So one of the misconceptions is messing around with the government. I want you to talk to that in particular, Nirma. A lot of people are scared to approach this topic because they don't want, the government meddling around in their finances. So, can you
Right,
talk to that
right,
a bit?
right, right. That, you know what, that's a very sensitive topic to many entrepreneurs and startups. They feel they're intimidated by the Canada Revenue Agency, um, but um, the SR&D program, although it is controlled by the Canada Revenue Agency, it is a separate department of the Canada Revenue Agency. So they're not responsible for auditing your company financially. So uh, let me explain how the process works. So let's say you put in a claim as part of your tax refund, sorry, return, and you file it. Two things can happen. The CRA can say, well, based on what you're saying, and cost makes sense, here's your money. So we accept your claim, no question asked. Or they can say, well, based on what you're saying, we have some questions. We want to come and talk to you. Okay. So when that happens, that's an audit. Okay. But the word audit is not something that you really need to be afraid of. I always tell clients, it's an opportunity for you to explain to the CRA all the cool stuff you're doing and how you're documenting the work. Maybe it's not going to be perfect, but you have a way of documenting. You have a way, you're doing some work. It's your opportunity to explain to the CRA what you're doing and for them to have a dialogue with you. So at the meeting, they're only evaluating your R&D project and costs related to your R&D project. So remember when I was talking about labor costs, materials, and contractor costs, they're just looking at that. They're not auditing your company financially. They're not looking at any other stuff. Okay. And that let's make it clear. So the worst thing that they can do is at the meeting is to say, well, look, based on the information you've provided us, we can't substantiate your work. So sorry, apply next year. Okay. That's the only thing that they can do. There's no penalty. There's no additional consequences of not. Now, of course, let's get one thing straight. Like, if you're involved in fraud, then that's another thing, right? Then, if CRA suspects that you're committing tax fraud, then they have the authority to go and look at your financial records of your company and all of that. But that is an exception because you're doing something illicit, right? Uh, but if you're applying for your project and worst comes to worst, they say, well, no, this we don't think that this is going to qualify based on our analysis. So sorry, apply next year. That's the only consequence there. So ultimately, it would be viewed as time wasted, right? because you're preparing for this audit, you explain to the CRA, and ultimately, it's rejected. So that's the only caveat. And one thing is, you know, I'm a science person. I like things black and white, but when you're dealing with a CRA, nothing really is black and white, right?
Mhm.
There are good reviewers, not so good reviewers. There are people that really understand what you're doing, people who won't really understand, who won't take the effort to understand. So there is a human element at play. You might have the best project, you might have the best documentation, but sometimes when CRA is reviewing you, they will find something to reduce your claim by, right? So it doesn't always happen, but there's a human element there, right? Like it's not like you check these things or you go through a formula and right is right, wrong is wrong, right? So there's sometimes ego at play. There's going back to their boss and say, hey, you know what, I was able to recover X amount. I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that. But when you're dealing with the human element, uh, even the best projects sometimes can get reduced.
Mhm. And I remind people, if you don't try, you will not succeed. So if you don't apply for the SR&D tax credit, you won't get it. Just how if you don't buy the lottery ticket, you're not going to win the lottery. So the main thing is here, contact Nirma if you have a project that you think will qualify, or if you know a great company that's doing something great and innovative. We want you to get tax credits. We want you to get money back. We want our economy to grow, and we want Canadian products, Canadian economy to boost, and we want more money in your pocket. So uh, please give Nirma a shout. And if you have any inquiries, please give Public Allies a shout as well. We are more than happy to direct you back to Nirma or answer any questions that we can. Thank you again, Nirma, for coming on our platform, and everybody else. I know there was lots of questions. If you can answer them, please contact Nirma directly and give out his number. It's in the chat. It's in the comments and description below. Don't be scared to contact him. He loves talking, and he is a great advocate for helping individuals, companies grow and make their footprint. So thank you again from Public Allies. We will be back next week, Tuesday, with a business promotion. Yes, we've started doing small business promotions to help companies that are struggling during COVID, and we want to give them some of the great love that we've received back from you. So we want to let you guys know that they're there. And next week, Thursday, we will be having a real estate roundtable hosted by Aisha. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you again for all your love and support. And reach out to us if you have any suggestions, if you want us to do something on our platform that would benefit you and help educate other individuals. So thank you again.
Thank you.